everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Khalil. Our show is brought to you by UCAN. On today's episode, we have Dex Hopkins and sports analyst Mike Halpin here to discuss the worldwide ranking system that CrossFit just introduced to the game season through their Hopper email. Now, for the ranking system, CrossFit is using past performances from the Open, quarterfinals, semifinals, and the games from the last two seasons. Dex, as a former games athlete and last year a semifinalist, what are your thoughts on this structure?
I think the more structure and honestly, like the more consistency through the season, the better. I love the structure from last year. We've talked about it kind of ad nauseum about open, quarters, semis. Love it. I think it's great. That seems like that's here to stay. And this seems like something to professionalize that down the line and make, because essentially now if you are a, zero chance you're not going to get top or 10% athlete, that you can just basically toss the open out and it's 3 extra training weeks where you put something that's kind of bothersome in your training at the end of the day, beginning of the day, whenever you do it. But now if it matters and they're going to go off past performances, then you don't want like that 3-week open where you kind of took a vacation to get ready for quarter semis and kept training through to knock you out of whatever it could knock you out of. But I think it's a good step. I mean, we talked about it being comparable to other sports that have pro cards, like golf. I think this is a good opportunity to have a point system, to have like actual professional cards, and it be more spectacle, more professional, and more, just draw more money in, and there be like levels to it without sacrificing like the community part of the Open.
Using yourself maybe as an example, though, did you care about the Open last year? Do you think that could in fact skew it for a lot of these athletes that maybe just – trained through the Open essentially?
Yeah, well, and I had the COVID during the Open. I did horrible. Yeah, I did not
better
think
than me.
quarters. Well, I did not think quarters was going to do well. Well, yes, like I had, I was fit, but I had COVID, so I was pissed the whole time. Like I'm getting destroyed by my training buddy. Her name's Hester. Good athlete. Strength's probably not her thing. Ran me into the absolute ground in the Open. And so I was, able to toss it, but still get into a top 10% and just kind of recoup for the quarters. But yeah, I mean, if it was like this, I wouldn't. If there are points on the table, my favorite thing about the Open, in the 5 weeks, was that like you had to stay checked in, you could do the crazy redo thing, and it meant something. So I remember when they used to take 60, then they took 40, and then they started taking 20. It was super regionals. And so those were the big cuts and like, the panic attack if I'm going to qualify high enough and then kind of be close enough to get backdoored and all that. But yeah, now it was a toss. Last year, like I was super glad that it did not matter, quote, quote, if you're to go to quarterfinals.
Until now.
Until now, yeah.
So kind of spinning off of that, obviously we don't have all the details quite yet, but it brings up some notable athletes to me, like Ricky Garrard, who were previously serving a drug sanction, or Roman Krenikov, who couldn't compete at the games due to visa issues, which I'm sure that CrossFit is thinking of and taking into consideration. But Mike, I'm curious, what about some of those athletes that might have had an injury the last 2 years, or one of these situations where the beginning of the season really didn't express their fitness?
Yeah, so there's a couple folks I looked at for that. Willie George in 2021, his Open was 55,000 out of the Open. So there's a few people in local gyms that probably beat him out. But with the way that they've started to explain it, and I know Boz jumped on a podcast with Chase, and then Dave was on with Tommy and Sean. With the way they've started to explain it, it will be a moving 24 months. So the Open 2 years ago won't matter as soon as they do the Open in 2023. So there are some of these that if they really just chugged along or had a sickness or had an illness or some sort of injury some part of the year, they will start to see that fall off a little bit, and they can take, obviously everybody's going to be super serious now about the Open and quarterfinals, where they usually may have just done what they had to before. But yeah, Ricky Garrard or some of these are going to be important cases to look at as far as how they weight last year, or we're really talking about 2023, but 2021. There's other athletes like a Bethany Shadburn who got COVID for 2021's CrossFit Games, right? And she wasn't able to compete, and then had a back injury last year that took her out of the quarterfinals. And she wasn't able to go on any. So there's quite a few athletes that have these large holes when you look at an 8 contest 2-year schedule that they'll really have to do well if they want to jump back into the individual competition here in the Open.
Dex, you look like you wanted to say something on that.
No, that's a great point. That's yeah, if there are gaps in the body of work, right, whether it was at your own hand or not, and that's something to consider when they're going, you know, kind of backdating stuff. I think I might have read it wrong also. I didn't know they were starting that this year as far as like working back. You know, so you can't, hell, like, you know, I can't go back and be like, you know, wish I went harder when I had COVID or whatever, and wish this didn't happen like Bethany's back. And so, yeah, that's a tough draw. I wonder what kind of adjustments will be made for that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Brent Fikowski is going to get close to 1,000th in the Open this time around. He might take it a little bit more seriously if he has to actually make a big push there. But like, I think there's still athletes that they do have to. We'll probably talk about this. There is a difference between what they're talking about with the worldwide ranking and then how that informs the strength of field, to where they're all in it together with the strength of field part. But so far, and they said this a few funny ways when they were talking about it, everything's wet cement or everything's really not in stone. So
they keep that card.
Yeah, they can keep tweaking it, but they wanted to get out in front. And I think just on that part, as far as I think it is a step in the right direction, but I would say it's one they're going to have to stick with, at least structurally, for a little bit of time, because we've seen the national champions. We've seen, obviously nobody could control the COVID year, but now we've seen 2 years of what you talked about, like this great structure. So we need to see, okay, they're going to build on top of that and keep it going for 1, 3, 5, 10 years where we can actually see something like these player cards.
And to that point, everybody wants to see change. We all want to see the sport move in the right direction. And I think CrossFit is trying to answer the call almost by doing something like this. But since we're almost watching this happen in real time, do you think that this system actually would work better if they announced that this was going to happen 2 years from now? That way athletes can start being intentional about the Open, intentional about the entire season.
That's how I read it. Yeah. So joke's on me.
Psych.
Yeah, psych. Surprise, those last 2 years. Oh, that would make more sense. Yeah. Right. The not so fine bold print in the email. But I mean, that makes sense to me. Flow, well, hey guys, starting now, going forward, this is the thing. Because you can't, like I said, you can't change an injury, you can't change a gap in, you know, Ricky stuff, you can't change a lot of stuff. So you're just kind of stuck with what you got. But I wonder if they'll triage these things, right? Like a Brent, or like a Willie. Like, you know, if you had a games appearance, does that trump everything under that? If you were a perennial semifinals athlete, does that trump everything in your Open? You know, or if you're a bubble athlete for getting to a semi, you know, those kind of nitpicky things, like, well, what the hell would that work? Or, you know, if they triage down like that. So, I mean, if I had a bad Open for, you know, one of those reasons, and then I went on to get top 10 at the games, like, does it really matter? But, you know,
you do have some interesting athletes there, like a Tyler Christoffel, who had he got right in, was right on the
2 years
edge.
in a row. Yeah.
And then got right into the LCQ. It doesn't look like last year's or 2 years ago's LCQ sounds like it'll matter too much, but you do have these athletes that were just right there, and you wonder, like, they haven't released any of the weighting or the scale, but like, how much would it matter to just be right on the edge of the games, or like a Chandler Smith or somebody like that as well. Yeah.
I think it's good, like, that they're getting out in front of it. I think the speed of the information is a big comfort thing. Whether it's fluid or not, the wet cement thing is a good way to put it. I think the more informed everybody feels, you know, being in the dark's not fun at all. So even if there's like something that's subject to change, it's cool. So, you know, big round of applause for that, CrossFit. That's new. But yeah, man, there's a lot of variables there, especially with like a lot of cases like those too. But I don't hate it. I think it's a good move, especially because of what they say, we were committed to this structure for 1 or 3 years with quarters and all that.
Something like that. It sounded like.
And we did away with LCQ already, right? Not a thing. So, you know, I'd be interested to see how, like, they create opportunities to get those points. You know, we talked about it before we started recording. You know, there's only so many opportunities to do that. in the realm. And I know they license events like Egypt's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Dubai, I think, killed their partnership, but that, maybe that's something they rekindle.
Yeah.
Wadapalooza could be one. But I mean, then you get like you said, you bring back the shit show that was sanctionals, and by God, nobody, athlete or coach, wants that. So
yeah, I don't know that I was saying they should bring it back. I was just saying similar. They brought up tennis and PGA a lot. Similar to those,
Yep.
there's tons of events that people can go to. They're licensed events, and those actually count towards this ranking system in some way. Like in some of those cases, they take the best number of events for that athlete. In other cases, they take all of them and sort of segment them or figure out the best way to factor those all in. What they have said that I've heard is obviously the Open will count less than the games. But with that, they have to control the fact that there's hundreds of thousands of people doing the Open and there's 40 men and 40 women doing the games. So with those, it sounds like they are still doing the simulations. That's the wet cement part that they have to figure out. Okay, we have to make sure this math works.
This episode is brought to you by UCAN. Who can? You can. At least I can with UCAN with one of their easy squeeze pouches that give me the energy I need to get through my workout without causing a crash. When I work out early in the morning but don't want to on an empty stomach because we know mid-wan I'm going to be hangry, I grab one of their super easy on the stomach bars. Chocolate almond butter? Yes, please. I may not be a games athlete yet, but UCAN helps me stay focused and energized during my workouts. It delivers steady release carbs for long-lasting energy without spiking blood sugar levels, the key to sustaining peak performance and focus and recording videos like these. Trusted by top CrossFit pros like Scott Panchik and Emily Rolfe, get your hands on these goodies and even save 20% on your first order with our code CHALKUP, link in the description. Now back to the episode.
Okay, so then let's take a look at kind of the regional breakdown that they have. With the new system, there are 17 additional game spots that will be allocated. But aren't those just the 2 last chance qualifier spots, the 10 spots taken away from North America, and the 5 taken away from Europe, which arguably are 2 of the most competitive regions? So how does that factor into the conversation?
I think that's the straightforward part. Well, no, I think that's the straightforward part is like, or the mystery rather, because that's something you got to really have ironed out. And so I hope they figured out how they're going to do the field calculation, and it can be very something. Hey guys, here's a spreadsheet. Because if it's, hey man, there are a lot of games athletes in North America West, and we really messed up where we drew that line. Here's 7 extra spots, guys. Like it's going to have to be a little more objective. That's all. I don't hate that because you're exactly right. It's just putting in the pocket of those spots they took away. And so I'll be interested to see how they present that information. Like, here's why they get this and all those things.
And it sort of does feel like, because we've heard this so many times, and obviously Brian Friend has brought it up probably the most, is Oceania needs more spots. And you look at that a lot of different ways. Tia's back to actually competing at Torian. So with that, yeah, she needs a spot, and then Ellie and others need spots as well. So this is the ability for them to say, hey, we have the best athletes in the world down here in Australia and the Oceania area. So let's show out and see like how many spots we can really get out of this. Can we get 4, 5, 6? With that though, like when you want to talk about the North America, it is very lopsided toward the east right now. Like if you live in the East, you may want to think about just spending next year somewhere on the west side of the Mississippi River.
Say that? I know a lot of people that are doing that, dog.
Yeah. So I've been trying to keep track as best I can of some of that. Danielle obviously moved to Florida from Vegas, so that she's jumping over. I think Danny Spiegel has moved from California and working with Ben Smith. I just hear things on Instagram or where everybody else does. But with that, like, you start to wonder, like, yeah, will there be athletes that just see the competitive advantage to go, oh, well, they have to get a minimum 5 spots. But if you look at it, there's only 2 athletes that were 2-time games athletes that are living in the West territory. And that's Emily Rolfe, who had to withdraw, and that's Ariel Lowen, who got 11th. Mm-hmm. Besides that, they're 1-time games athletes that are in the West right now, as far as where they sort of came from. Like Alex Kazan, and then who else? Oh, Freya Mooseberger. So with that, they could start to look at that because East is on both men and women is stacked. None of the other regions have really a choice. They all just have one semifinal now, but there is going to be a lot of interesting moving around as we get closer to the season, I think.
You remember the crazy system they used to have, like why Central East used to be such a show? It's because they had the Legends thing. If you'd been or whatever, you had a spot. So Central East had been taking 5 people for years before it was a thing because Rich was there. Who else? Dan or champions. That was it. So Rich and Graham would qualify. So they slid down the podium. So they've been taking 5 for years. So, I don't think it'll be something like that, but it was, it'll be a lot of weird things going on. That line, I wonder if they regret that immediately after they put it out. No, and you can't reel it back in because surely you had to know.
The way that I look at this, though, it just seems like it's a situation with, like, did the chicken come first or did the egg come first? Like, nobody knows, but they both equal the same exact thing. So even though they reallocated these spots, it all kind of just comes back to be the same, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason like people would leave Central East, right? Stacked field. They only took 3. Eventually they only took 5. You don't want to be in that mess if you don't have to be. And if you're a person that's capable of moving, move, right? Like that used to be the deal. Unlike last year where it's, luck of the draw where they stuck you, or a sanctional year when it's just, hey, we're not training anymore, we're competing, and that's how we train is doing qualifiers. But yeah, I mean, I could see people moving like exactly like he said, relocate for the season, have an apartment you might not live in, use the address, whatever the case may be, because of the way the optics of it right now. Because for sure what they've said is these amount of spots are going to be there. Maybe there are no more, but I got a way better shot at claiming one of those 5 than going to this place where they may or may not. They did say that you'll know before you get on site at your semifinal how many they're taking, so that's cool.
Right. Yep.
But if I thought not a shoe in, but my percentage was way higher where I was, say a lady in the East, I'm staying. I'm gonna shoot that shot hard. If maybe they add 2 to the East and it's 7, and the West is going to take 5 only, not add any because of the depth of field, definitely staying in the West. And if I don't know, hey, I can shoot in to get one of these 7 in the East, I'm moving. Definitely. Especially if you're a person that has the means. And most of those people are the type of people that have the means athletically, and they are the professional in the sport, right? And everybody's not. Some people have real jobs and this, that, and other. But the people that in that region for North America East, like that might be a thing to look at. I don't know what the date is, but we're getting close.
And it's good to hear, as you said, they are going to try to solidify as most they can before the Open, before the semifinals, because a consideration here is that Roman Krennikov could be competing out of North America if his waivers and all that goes through. And he should
be. He should be, yeah.
But that then factors into what does Asia get out of that if he's not there? What does North America, I think he's in Wisconsin.
Well,
what does North America West get with him and
Justin? Regardless,
Asia
gets 2. This would just be additional spots.
I see a lot of those spots going to Oceania for sure. Like probably like an upsetting amount. Like there's gonna be a lot of fussing about that up front, but I think it'll be a lot less than last year when nobody knew what semi they were going to until it was too late to make travel adjustments. Like you can't go to Canada because of whatever stance you had on this, that, and other. But yeah, like that clarity of, hey, quarters are over. I know how many they're taking and where I'm going. I mean, that's going to clear up a lot. There's going to be some pushback either way. But that's why I think keeping it as objective as possible will be good, especially like on the home front for CrossFit presenting new information and new flows. I think they learned last year, like the lack of grace they got for having, whether it was Boz doing the programming or anything like that. Them getting out ahead of that is definitely a sign of growth and them approaching things differently. And, you're not in the dark. You might not be fully standing under the street light, but here's some things we know right now, and it's fluid. And I don't see the problem with that,
So with the details that we have so far, are there athletes, or maybe even we'll break it down by regions, that will ultimately be hurt by this system and regions that will gain incentive from this system?
I think Oceania is the one that gets brought up. And it makes sense there. With Ricky down there, obviously he's going to have a little bit of if they're looking back 2 years, he'll have it'll be interesting how they do that. But with Tia actually competing down there, if Cara goes again, Ellie and others, they need more spots. Like there's all the people I just listed off, and then there's 3 or 4 more people that could qualify to the games if they were in North America. I think besides Oceania, I think it's really going to come down to how North America lines up, because the West is pretty empty and the East is overpacked to where you could see West getting just what they get, and then East really taking over the rest of what maybe they want to allot to North America.
Because it's blatantly lopsided.
Yeah, there are 15 games athletes from the 2022 games for the women living in the West, and for the men, it's 12 games athletes that live in the West. I'm sorry, they both live in the East.
Sure.
So,
and spots don't have to be equally allocated for men and women of these as well.
Yeah,
which
is wild.
When it comes to Africa, Asia, South America, I think they'll get what they get. It'll be interesting around the Roman piece, because they're still going to get 2 regardless of where Roman goes. And then,
do we know where Gia is going to be competing? I think he
hadn't got back over here yet.
Yeah,
he and Sidney McAlishan. Sid's still in Canada. I think Guy's still in. I've seen him lifting not so expensive looking weights, so he's not in the barn anymore. So yeah, that'd be interesting to see. Roman should not have to leave. But other than that, the Guy situation, him having to go this year was crazy to me. Roman having to go was crazy.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how they navigate those things. The precedent that they're getting ahead and they're communicating well way ahead of time is cool to me, and it seems like that car will drive a little faster than it used to. So that's encouraging, as on both ends, coach hat and athlete hat on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike. Or are you going to say something?
I was just going to add Dennis Samsonoff is another one to call out. He's at Zelos games this weekend. He would likely also be somebody to try to do that waiver, because he just had to do LCQ or not travel because of his situation. So
yeah, so man, that's a tangled web last year. The clarity is going to be so, like, new systems like wiped, the clarity and from the top down is going to be so much better for the sport in general. And that's like in every facet, fans to follow, athletes to proceed with it, coaches to coach, and all those things. So it looks like the evolution of it is going in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
So Mike, what's your bottom line? Is this a better system that is in the right direction?
I think as they said on the podcast, they were talking on, the cement is still wet, but it's going in the right direction. We'll see what the foundation looks like this year. Yeah,
that's a good way to put it.
What's your bottom line? You can't use the same analogy.
No, I'm an analogy guy. That's why I appreciate it. This is structure-wise, communication-wise, all the things that are in this bubble that they're bringing are good. Communication, how far ahead of time it is, all those things. And the evolution of this is promising, right? As far as like the professionalism of the sport, taking money out of it, just the optics of, hey, you are a professional, here's why. We weighted this place more because of this. So the more clarity, the better. And I think, going in the right direction. We're going to have a set structure for like, hey, this is the CrossFit season, not, this year we don't know what's going to happen. So I don't feel that way. And I've, it's almost comical and like a point of pride and see who can navigate it and stay in the game. But, when you're able to just put your head down and express your kind of peak body of work fitness you've done all year because there's no question marks, I think that benefits everybody. So that's what this seems like. I'm excited. I think this is 2 in a row we've broke down that we didn't have to like, complain the whole time about them. So, hats off, CrossFit. Keep it rolling, baby. That's why I hadn't thrown this CrossFit Cup out yet. Don't worry about it. That's right.
Oh my God. And specific details used to establish that ranking system and strength of field, they will be released before the start of the Open on February 16th. And the strength of field will be determined prior to the start of all semifinals, which kick off May 18th. So more details to come. Dex, Mike, thanks for joining us and talking about the topic, breaking it down a little bit more. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks.